My male colleague took credit for my work at a board meeting. What my CEO did next left the entire room speechless. I spent 3 months developing a revolutionary marketing strategy that increased our conversion rates by 47%. Yesterday, my male colleague presented it as his own work. Today, I am sitting in his former office. Let me back up. I am the only woman on our marketing team at a tech company that's about 80% male. I've worked here for 4 years, consistently delivering results, but somehow always getting overlooked for promotions. Meanwhile, Mark joined just 18 months ago and was already promoted twice. When our quarterly numbers showed a serious decline, our CEO demanded innovative solutions. I worked nights and weekends analyzing data, identifying patterns others missed, and developing a completely new approach to our target demographic. I documented everything meticulously in our shared drive and mentioned my progress in team meetings. Last week, I submitted my final presentation to my director, Jason. He seemed impressed, but said, "Let's have Mark present this to the board. He has more experience with executive presentations." I was disappointed but not surprised. This wasn't the first time my work was handed to someone else to present. I reluctantly agreed and spent 2 hours briefing Mark on all the nuances of my strategy. Yesterday was the board meeting. I sat in the back row while Mark took the podium. As he began speaking, my stomach dropped. He wasn't using my slides. He had recreated the entire presentation with his name on every page. Worse, he was describing my work using I statements. I discovered this untapped market segment. I developed this unique approach. I project these results based on my analysis. I felt physically ill. 3 months of my life stolen in front of my eyes. I looked around the room. Did no one notice? My director was nodding along the board. Members were taking notes, and the CEO, Christine, was watching intently. When Mark finished, the room erupted in applause. Christine stood up and said, "Before we continue, I have a question for Mark." Mark smiled confidently. Of course. Christine's expression remained neutral. This strategy represents a significant departure from our traditional approach. Can you walk us through your data analysis process? Anyways, how did you identify the correlation between customer retention and social engagement patterns? Mark's smile faltered. Well, I looked at the numbers and noticed trends. Which specific metrics did you analyze first? Christine pressed. Mark glanced at me briefly. Conversion metrics, and Christine cut him off. That's interesting because I reviewed the server logs this morning. I can see that these files were created and modified exclusively by Sarah over the past 3 months. In fact, you only accessed them for the first time yesterday afternoon. The room went completely silent. Christine continued, her voice eerily calm. "Sarah, would you please come to the front? I'd like to hear about your work directly from you." Shaking, I walked to the podium. Mark slunk back to his seat, his face ashen. I presented my actual work, answering detailed questions from board members who suddenly seemed much more engaged than they had been with Mark. When I finished, Christine thanked me and then addressed the room. "Excellence and integrity are our core values. We cannot achieve the former without the latter." She turned to my director, Jason. "I'd like to see you in my office immediately after this meeting this morning." I was called into AR. I feared I was somehow in trouble for causing a scene. Instead, I was informed that Mark had been terminated for ethical violations. Jason was being demoted for enabling the behavior, and I was being promoted to senior director of EPU strategy with a 30% salary increase. They also gave me Mark's corner office with a window. As I was moving in my things, Christine stopped by. I thanked her for what she'd done. She leaned against the doorframe and said, "20 years ago I was you." Semen took credit for my work, but nobody stood up for me. I promised myself if I ever had the power to stop it from happening to someone else, I would. She straightened up to leave, then added, "The board was impressed not just with your strategy, but with how you handled yourself under pressure. That's executive material." I've spent all day rearranging furniture in my new office and thinking about Christine's words. The view from this window is incredible, but not nearly as satisfying as the view of Mark carrying his belongings out in a cardboard box. Sometimes justice doesn't announce itself with thunderous applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the form of server logs and a female CO who remembers what it was like to be invisible.